Hello, everyone. Welcome to my keynote. So, today we're going to talk about how AI is impacting humans and technology, and how we, as developers and testers, can help to build inclusive AI. So, before we get started, I just wanted to give you an idea of how the world has changed because of AI. So, let's start with this fun quiz. So what do these three movies have in common? You have 2001 Space Odyssey, which is an amazing movie. Then you have the movie Her. And then you have Ex Machina, which is slightly creepy for my taste, but still it's a good movie. So what do you think is common between these three movies? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to think about it. So, if you had guessed they are not sci-fi movies anymore, then kudos to you. That's the right answer. That is right, people. This is not sci-fi anymore. So what we thought was sci-fi movies in the past are a reality right now. So for example, let's take 2001 Space Odyssey. In that movie, we have an intelligent computer system named HAL, which helps astronauts and has intelligent conversations with humans. And this is similar to IBM Watson because it does the exact same thing. And then you have the movie Her, where we have this intelligent computer operating system called Samantha, and the hero falls in love with it. And this is similar to how we have fallen in love with Alexa, Google Home, and Siri, right? Is it starting to make sense right now? Is reality kicking in for you right now? Finally, in Ex Machina, we had the humanoid Ava. And now we have Pepper and Sophia, who are humanoids as well. In fact, Sophia gives kick-ass talks and interviews, so you definitely have to check her out. But this is the thing. We thought Ava and Ex Machina was sci-fi, but they're not sci-fi anymore because we have this humanoids right now, which are literally working and is present in this day and age. And also, an interesting fact is, in the movie Ex Machina, Ava is trained from a fictional search engine named Blue Book. And now we have Google search engine, which is training Sophia and Pepper. So everything is a reality right now. So just to give you some context in terms of what are some of the issues which are happening with AI or how AI is impacting us. So let me start with a story. So this is what I call the Alexa story. So how many of you have virtual assistants like Google Home, Siri, Alexa? Of course, you'll probably be nodding your head or raising your hand, but I cannot see you because we are joining in remotely. But I feel a majority of you have virtual assistants because, come on folks, this is the 21st century, right? Anyways, the point is I had an Alexa as well. And I had this weird situation happening with Alexa, and I don't know whether you had that kind of problem. So, periodically, Alexa used to automatically get triggered even without me talking to her. For example, one day I was having a romantic dinner with my wife, and then all of a sudden I hear this voice. I know what you did last summer. And it creeped the shit out of me, right? And yeah, I know this is an exaggeration in terms of how it replied to me, but the point is it triggered randomly, and then I jumped up on my seat because I didn't know why it was getting triggered. So I was getting curious in terms of why this is happening, and this is what I found. Apparently, big companies like Google and Apple have contractors who are listening to your audio clips, and then they're using those audio clips to train your virtual assistant. And even without triggering Alexa, it is actually gathering data so that these contractors can analyze these audio clips and train the AI better. And once this became a big issue and came out in the media, Apple and Google decided to fire these contractors because it is infringing on our privacy. But Amazon, they did something different because they didn't want to fire the contractor. So what they did was they released a feature called Alexa Guard, and the whole premise is it's going to constantly listen to you, and if there's a break-in, then immediately it's going to notify you. So basically what's happening is they're legitimizing creepiness to a whole new level, and that's what is happening. And because of all these things happening, and I was getting freaked out, this is what I did. I sold my Alexa. True story. That's the picture when I sold it. So, why did I share this Alexa story? Yeah, one thing for sure is technology can be creepy. But the main point to note here is companies are using us, the community, to figure out their content marketing strategies. So they're using these AI models to gather data through Alexa, through our Siri, through our phones, which are constantly listening to us. And then, based on natural language processing, it identifies all these keywords from our conversation and then starts giving targeted advertisements to us so that we buy more and companies make more money. So that's why when companies hire me to do technical talks at private events, before accepting to speak, I make sure the systems they're using does not compromise data, privacy, and other ethical standards, which are really important to me and other people probably listening to this talk today. Also, I have career coaching clients because that's what I do. I coach VP, CTOs, directors, and people in the senior level roles to become better leaders. And when I coach them, they tell me about all these things happening in their companies because they're usually working startups and they have some sort of AI in them. And that's how I stay connected to this topic, and that's how I'm giving you all this information. And this is the reality, people. So in today's talk, I wanted to make you aware of the world we live in. We are surrounded by AI, whether we like it or not. So how do people build such AI models? And how do they test these systems? And how can we prevent problems like this from happening in terms of problems with data, privacy, security, biases? And that's what we're going to discuss today. So on a high level, this is what we're going to cover. First, I'm going to demystify AI a little bit so that when I use different terminologies, you're familiar with what I'm saying. And then we're going to talk about its impact to humans. And finally, we're going to cover how it's impacting software development and testing. So let's start with demystifying AI. So today, if you stop and ask anyone working in a technology company, what is the one thing that would help them change the world or make them grow faster than anyone else in their field? The answer would be data. Yes, data is everything because data can essentially change, cure, fix, and support just about any problem you can think of. It's the truth behind everything from finding a cure for cancer to studying the shifting weather patterns. And to comb through trillions of data sets, and find different patterns, which would be hard for the human mind to do, we use AI. So let's go back to that Alexa example. So what it was doing was it was analyzing all the data based on our conversation, and then it was feeding us targeted advertisements and getting randomly triggered by mistake as well. And this is what is actually happening. So let's just take a step back and talk about how AI actually works and what that actually means. So AI is a field of study that deals with building machines that can work and think like human beings, right? And machine learning and deep learning are just subsets of AI and are often used synonymously these days. It's based out of the neural network of our human body because in our human body, there's so many neurons which keep interacting with different connections called synapses. And fun fact is the human brain contains as many neurons as there are stars in the Milky Way, in the ballpark of 100 billions, right? And these interactions which are happening between these neurons, that causes all the actions and reactions which I'm doing. So for example, me talking to you, me blinking my eye, me making all these hand gestures are because of these connections and the interactions which are happening between these junctions called synapses. So what they did was they took this concept of our neural network system and then brought that to the area of computer science. And that's how we have deep neural networks. And that's what we hear about in general in the media. So now your next question is going to be, okay, this is all well and good, but show me with a live demo of how you can train a neural network. So for that, I have a really fun exercise, which I'm going to show you right now. So there's this app called, it's a web app, it's called Quick Draw. And what it does is, based on what we draw, it tries to make predictions in terms of what objects you're trying to draw as well. And it has a neural network behind it. And these people at Google, man, they made this game so much fun. So millions of people have already used it and it has gathered so much of data so that it can predict accurately what you're trying to draw. So I have this quick draw on another screen. Let's just go over it and you're going to understand what I'm talking about. And this is a neural network training in real time. So it says draw a bottle cap in under 20 seconds. So let's see what happens.
I see line. I see leg, or knee, or nose. I see pear, or smiley face, or apple, or vase. I see cherry, or wine bottle, or helicopter, or house plant. I see blueberry. I see cupcake.
So
sorry, I couldn't guess it.
So drawing is not my forte. So let's try another. Let's try another time and see whether it guesses it correctly. So
I see circle, or square, or yoga, or person. I'm not sure what that is.
Man, I'm really bad at it, seriously.
Oh, I know, it's shoe.
There you go. See, it correctly guessed what we are trying to draw. But yeah, this is a really fun exercise. I can keep doing it, but I have a keynote to finish. But this is neural network training in real time, people. So definitely go check it out. Let's just go back to my slides. Next, we're going to talk about what are the different AI techniques which you hear and which are commonly used these days. So you have supervised, unsupervised learning, reinforced learning, and so much more. If you want more details about it, hit me up or check my blog post, okay? So hopefully all those things help you get an understanding of the basics of AI, okay? The next thing we're going to talk about is how AI is impacting humans. And this is a really, really important thing for us developers and testers to know when we interact with these AI-based systems. So AI can be broadly classified into weak AI and then strong AI. So what is weak AI? Currently, all the AI-based systems we know of or we use are weak AI because they're trained in doing one thing really well, but if you ask it to do something else, it does not know how to react to it. It cannot react to different external stimuli, which is not trained for. So for example, so we have a company called DeepMind, which is part of Google now. And what they did was they built an AI model called AlphaZero. And they trained AlphaZero to play chess, and then it beat the world's best chess player. And then they trained it to play the game Go, and it beat the world's best Go player. But then they gave it a simple math problem like what's 1 plus 1, and it did not know how to solve it, right? Because currently all the AI we see is narrow AI. It is fast, clever, but not intuitive, emotional, or culturally sensitive. So it's just like having a pocket calculator, right? You cannot talk to the pocket calculator and say things like, oh man, I'm feeling lonely, and be pissed that it's not responding to you because it just does one thing well and it does not know how to react to it. So that is weak AI. Strong AI is when AI can react, think, and work like human beings. For example, I can have a cheeseburger and then code in my left hand and then have a conversation with my colleague. But AI cannot do that yet. So when it can reach that capacity of multitasking and thinking, that's when we are going to get strong AI. So contrary to popular beliefs, it's going to take a long time before AI-powered superhuman robots take over the world. Some say it's going to take 2055, and some say it's going to take at least a couple of centuries. So we are far, far away from the maturity of AI. So that's the basic difference. Now let's talk about some of the good things and not so good things happening in the AI space. And knowing that, you are going to realize how it's impacting especially the area of diversity, culture, and biases. So let's start with good things happening in AI because I'm an optimistic person. So recently, a company built an AI model which could scan different code written by programmers and identify who actually wrote the code. So what they did was, they were 600 programmers. They took 8 code samples each from these 600 programmers. And what they did was, they kept constantly training it. And after a certain level of training, the AI could predict with 83% accuracy who actually wrote that code. That is freaking awesome, right? Because when you have attacks like ransomware, and you don't know where it's coming from, you could possibly use these AI models to know who wrote the rogue code, where it's coming from, and take corrective actions immediately. So that is a really cool thing happening in the AI space. Similarly, in the medical space as well, a company built an AI which could predict the onset of Alzheimer's 6 years before its diagnosis. So what they did was, they fed the AI model different PET scans, and they did 2 rounds of training. In the first round, it could predict with 92% accuracy whether a person is going to get Alzheimer's, and in the second round with 98% accuracy. Things like this are so beneficial for people so that they can take preventive actions, right, as much as possible. So that is some cool things happening in the medical field. But there are also not so great things happening, which we're going to dive deep into in a second. So recently, Google Photos, they updated the AI model, and they brought out a new feature where it could automatically scan photos and put it in folders for us. That is super cool and helpful. But the problem was, it started categorizing all African American people as gorillas. And that was something which affected a lot of people. And there's just like an image recognition app, and you may think, okay, I know that's an issue, but it's not a big deal. But let me tell you a couple of more dark things happening because of AI. So the first thing is in the US prison space, AI is having a huge impact. So in the US, inmates are required to fill out a questionnaire called the LSIR questionnaire. And in that questionnaire, they're asked different questions to decide how much sentencing to give them. Some of the questions include, when was your first involvement with the police? Or, do any of your family members or relatives have a history of criminal charges? But these questions do not take into consideration the fact that the person grew up in an economically depressed neighborhood, and they may not have proper childhood or proper family. They don't take into consideration any of those factors, right? And that's a big problem because let me give you an example. So I live in Chicago, and the south side of Chicago is pretty rough because of various reasons. They don't have the sufficient finances to fund everything. So there are a lot of cops patrolling that area, right? And what happens is people get randomly questioned in that area. So say a person came from this neighborhood, and his answer to the question of when was your first encounter with the cops would be at the age of 6 because he was randomly questioned. And let's take another use case where another person who grew up in a rich, white, affluent neighborhood, he or she would say at the age of 35 he had a first encounter with cops because they do not have random patrolling happening in the neighborhood because it's economically really good. So what's going to happen is immediately the first person is going to be categorized as high risk, and then the second person is going to be categorized as low risk, and the sentencing is going to be based on that, which is really sad. And that's why a lot of African American people and Hispanic people are there in U.S. prisons because they come from bad neighborhoods and they don't get opportunities or a second chance, and they just get sentenced randomly. And that is the problem we are currently having, and which is a really, really big deal. Similarly, we have problems in recruiting as well. So a couple of years ago, University of Chicago and MIT did a joint experiment. What they did was they responded to different job openings in Boston and sent fictitious resumes with different names. Some resumes had white names and some resumes had African American names. And they found that white people had a 50% higher chance of getting callbacks than people of color because the AI model made decisions based on the names of the applicants and their location because you put the zip code and the address in your resume. So the odds are, if you have an African American name like DeAndre, Jeremiah, LaQuinta, Tanisha, you're already starting from a step back because you're not going to get called for as many jobs. And this is a huge impact because let's just take me, for example. My company name is Chai Latte Consulting, and there's nothing white about it. So if I am trying to submit proposals or applying for jobs, I'm already starting from a step back because I don't have a white name. So those are the problems which are currently happening, which are deeply rooted in our society and the systems we use, which has a lot of say in people's lives and their future as well, right? So how can we help to reduce these kind of problems? How can we help to build AI which is inclusive of culture, diversity, race, sex, religion? So that's what we're going to talk about next, which is impact to software development and testing. So let's just take a step back and talk about what AI really is, right? AI is a black box. No one knows how it makes decisions. Only recently there was a study in MIT where they were able to make an AI rationalize its decision-making process, but still that study is really primitive and it's going to take a lot of time for it to be generalized to a larger audience. So currently AI is a black box, right? So if you're a developer or a tester involved in interacting with these kind of systems, how are you going to approach these systems? How do you ensure it works properly? So let's talk about that. So first thing I'm going to cover is developing and testing AI-based systems, and then we're going to talk about AI-based development and testing. So there are two things we're going to talk about. So first, let's talk about developing and testing AI-based systems. First thing you want to keep in mind is you need to have a well-defined acceptance criteria. Because how do you know your AI model is working as expected? You need some way of measuring its progress and working, right? So just like how you have acceptance criteria on a normal basis for any systems, the same thing applies for AI-based systems as well. You have what is called evaluation metrics, which we're going to talk about, and that's what is going to help in measuring the performance of these AI-based systems. So let's just take a quick example. I just made up a raw example for you to understand this concept. Say you have an AI model which is used to detect cracks in your coffee mugs, right? If you see over here, the first coffee mug doesn't have a crack, so it's going to mark it as no crack. The second coffee mug has a crack, so it's going to mark it as a crack. And the third coffee mug has a design of a crack, but it's not actually cracked. It's still usable, but unfortunately gets confused and it marks it a crack, and it's a wrong result. And here, if you see, at the starting of this whole process, the team would have gathered and decided that one of their acceptance criteria was it should be greater than 95% accuracy. But here, if you see, the accuracy is not 95% because it got 1 out of 3 wrong, right? So accuracy, precision, and recall are 3 evaluation metrics which you could use to actually know whether an AI model is working properly. I'm not going to delve into the details, but you can see this slide to know how those evaluation metrics are calculated. Basically, it's based on true positives, true negatives, false positives, and false negatives, right? And they also use something called a confusion matrix to visualize the performance of the model. So that's how it works. Next, let's talk about more inclusive data sets. So, going back to the Google Photos example, that problem of categorizing African American people as gorillas could have been prevented if the person training the AI model used inclusive data sets. What do I mean by that? If the person had not only images of white people, but also images of brown people and different colored people in this data set, then the AI model would have known how to classify them. But the problem was they didn't use enough colored images in training that AI model in the Google Photos example. So always ensure your data set is inclusive. The next thing you want to have is an auditing process. So there should be a group of people who audit the performance of the AI model and the data sets used periodically to ensure everything is working properly. And then finally, you have to test for adversarial attacks. So just like SQL injection, AI models are prone to attacks as well. For example, let's just take an image recognition app because it's much more relatable. A person can change the pixel of images, pixel of the image fed to the AI model, and skew the learning of the AI model training so that when it gets into production, it starts behaving unexpectedly and causes problems. So just by changing some of the pixels in the images which are fed into the AI model, you can cause problems. That is an example. You also have to think about different edge cases. Say, for example, in the US, we have different festivals like St. Patrick's Day, Mardi Gras Festival, where people wear different funky costumes. So what if you have an image like this? Is it going to recognize this person as a female because of her funky glasses, right? That is something you want to think about. And say if you're working for an autonomous car company and training the AI model and testing it, you want to make sure you give different types of images. For example, what happens if you give an image of a stop sign with graffiti on them? Would the car stop or continue going, right? And I live in the Midwest in Chicago, so you're going to have situations like this where the stop sign is going to be covered with snow. And if that's going to be the case, is it going to recognize the stop sign? Is your autonomous car going to do that? Those are the edge cases we need to think about. Another company, they built an AI model called TextFooler. And what it did was, it was able to trick algorithms which was used to judge movie reviews. So for example, we had this movie review which says the characters cast in impossibly contrived situations are totally estranged from reality. And the algorithm classified this as a positive review. But then the text fooler AI model changed his review a little bit and fooled the algorithm by saying this: the characters cast in impossibly engineered circumstances are fully estranged from reality. And that was deemed as negative reviews, right? So just by changing words, you can also fool AI models and algorithms. Something to think about. So the next thing I want to talk about was the problem with deep fakes. So currently there are a lot of fake videos going around in social media, and they're able to synthesize fake videos of people saying things which they weren't actually saying. In fact, the other day there was a video of Obama saying something on Twitter, but it was just a fake video, right? So deep fakes is a really big issue. Just to show you an example of how it works is, I took a clip from Back to the Future, the movie, and the one on the left is the original clip, and the one on the right is the fake clip. So see what happens when I play it.
How's your head?
Good. Fine.
Oh, I've been so worried about you ever since you ran off the other night. Are you okay? What's hurting? Sorry, I have to go. Isn't he a dreamboat?
Doc, she didn't even look at him.
This is more serious than I thought. Apparently your mother is amorously infatuated with you instead of your father.
Whoa, wait a minute. Doc, are you trying to tell me that my mother has got the hots for me?
Precisely.
Whoa, this is heavy.
There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
What?
The only way we're going to get those two to successfully mate is if they are alone together. So you've got to get your father and mother to interact in some sort of social...
Well, what, you mean like a date?
Right.
What kind of date? I don't know.
But there you go. So that's an example for deepfake. And the one on the right was actually Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Holland from the Marvel movies. So that's how you can create deepfakes. So those are the things as developers and testers we need to keep in mind, how people can take advantage of AI models. The next thing I want to talk about was AI-based development and testing. So let's talk about testing, because I love testing. One of the biggest problems with software testing is in the area of UI test automation, specifically focus on the area of maintenance of these UI tests. A lot of solutions have come up in recent times, but now companies are using AI to help address that problem of maintenance. So let's just take an example for this. Say you have a web page, and what you see here is a simple login page with a username password label, a username password text box, then a login button, right? And it's made up of different IDs, name, classes, tag names, types, value, attributes, so on and so forth. Just a normal web page, nothing fancy. Say you write an automation script to validate whether the username label, password label is there, and then do whatever validations you want, then click on login button. And you run the test again, the test passes, you're all happy. But then a developer comes in and says, you know what? I am going to change the label name of username to user, just because I can, and say as a tester you use label name in your automation script. What's going to happen when you run the automation script which you wrote in our previous line? The odds are the test is going to break, because if you trying to identify the username label with the label name username, if you change it to user, the test is going to break. And that has been one of the biggest problems with UI test automation, where one small change just breaks the whole test. And the reason behind that is all the currently existing tools use what is called static location strategy, which is they're using a single attribute to look at a single element on a page. But with AI, you can use what is called dynamic location strategy, or what we call smart location strategy. So what's going to happen is for every element you interact with on the page, the AI underneath the hood is going to extract multiple attributes of that particular element. So say for this example, if a developer comes, changes the label name of username to user, the test won't break, because what's going to happen is the AI is going to say, I see that the username label changed to user, but let me look at another attribute. Let me look at the name attribute. Let me look at the ID attribute. Let me look at the class attribute. Let me look at the tag attribute, so on and so forth. So it tries to use multiple attributes which it has extracted to uniquely locate that element. And this is not happening in linear fashion. Think of it like a dinner plate where you have mashed potatoes, you have carrots, you have beans, coleslaw, and then in parallel, it immediately detects what element you are looking for. So that's the beauty of smart location strategy, and that's what people are using currently in their AI-based testing tools. In fact, I am consulting with 2 AI-based companies, and this is what they're using, and it helps to really reduce the maintenance time, and your decisions are based on multiple attributes, not just one attribute. And finally, the more tests you run, the smarter the test becomes, because it learns from failed tests and past tests. So that is the future we are in currently, which is AI-based test automation. Then you have what is called autonomous testing. So potentially what you could do is you can have an AI model which is listening and learning from different actions performed by the user in production. And based on that, it can automatically detect common user flows, create reusable components, and create tests for us. And say, for example, you're using an insurance application and you do 3 to 4 flows multiple amount of times that particular day, and you use the same username password multiple times. What could happen is the AI model could say, hey, you used the same username password like 50 times. Could I create a reusable component for you? And also, it could detect that you use like 3 to 4 common flows again and again, and it could say, can I create a test for you? So it's going to automatically create tests and reusable components for you. So that is autonomous testing, and this is a reality, people, because I've seen this live in action. So that is something which is coming up. Let's talk about AI-based development. So currently there are a lot of intelligent editors which are using AI underneath the hood to help developers do their job better. So, for example, you have Microsoft Visual Studio's IntelliCode editor, and it's an editor for developing C++ and C# apps. And what it does is it can learn, detect, and suggest coding styles and patterns based on already written code which you have done, and also helps improve readability and maintainability of the code. And similarly, you have other tools over here which does the exact same thing. It's using AI models to proactively find problems and also help to make the developers' jobs better. So those are some things I want to think about. The next thing is the coolest thing which I want to talk about was you have AWS Deep Lens AI Kit, and then you have Microsoft Vision AI Developer Kit. So currently one of the biggest problems in training these AI models is it's expensive, because you have to get a cloud subscription with Google ML Engine, Azure ML Engine, Amazon's ML Engine, and they're slightly expensive, especially when you're going to do a lot of training. But now, for under $250, you can buy these devices from Amazon or from online stores and literally train AI models locally from where you're sitting. These are hardware machines where you can upload an AI model and then train it. Of course, the processing power is not as much as the cloud engines, but they're sufficient enough for people who want to do mid-level data processing and analysis, right? So this is going to be really relevant in the upcoming months and something you want to think about. So in today's talk, I know I covered a lot of information, but the whole objective was how to build inclusive AI and what are the different things coming in the future, which we as developers and testers need to be aware of. If you want more information about different things I covered, check out my blog. And also, I share all these information in different external publications as well. So hit these two links and you'll get some useful information as well. And also, make sure you join my Facebook group. It's called Skyrocket Your Career, because at a lot of conferences I've seen people and I've talked to people who are curious to know about what an ML engineer does, what a data scientist does, what a software developer does. And I built this private group where I have a community of like-minded people who are in these roles, and they help other people get into these roles, especially in the AI and ML space as well. So if you are curious about what courses to take, what resources to read, how and what does a person in various AI roles does, I would highly recommend joining this group, and it's going to be really beneficial for you. And finally, these are some links where you can get in touch with me. You have my website. Of course, you can always email me. I'm more than glad to help people. And then I also send out a weekly newsletter with different articles, with different news regarding all these information, which I kind of discussed today. So make sure you subscribe to my newsletter and, of course, connect with me if possible. So if there's one thing you learn from today's keynote, please tweet it using the hashtag PNSQC2020 and make sure to tag me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, okay? Because I love other people sharing the knowledge with our community as well. So that's pretty much a wrap. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my knowledge on AI and its impact on humans and technology. Hopefully you found this useful, and I will see you at another conference. Thanks for listening.